Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the Monday study session for the Pierce County Council. The date is May 5th, 2025, and the time is 11:02. All members are present with the exception of Councilmember Krueger, Councilmember Morel, and Vice Chair Herrera. There we go. And Councilmember Ayala is virtual. But we're going to go ahead and go through our regular order of business. I do want to remind the team around when Ms. DeMuth is doing her report, we're going to note the time, get the information so that our colleagues that are not physically in the room are able to follow up and get to right where the meat of the meeting happens, so that we can all be on the same page. So, and thank you for everybody rescheduling and making this work. So that brings us to our legislative update. We'll start with Mr. Taylor. You'll notice there is no Mr. Shaw in the room.
Thank you. Good morning. So I just wanted to give you a quick summary of the plan for the next couple of weeks. So as the members are aware, the session concluded. The governor has 20 days to act on bills that the legislature adopted. Consistent with that time period, we're scheduling Mr. Shaw to come back in about 2 weeks. So the meeting of the 19th of May, Mr. Shaw will be prepared to brief out to you the status of what occurred at the state legislature, as well as information on bills that the governor has signed or vetoed. Now, that'll still be a few days early from the 20-day cutoff. The 20-day cutoff is actually the end of that week, which is the 23rd of May, I believe. But so there still may be some issues that are outstanding at that point in time, but we should have the majority of the items settled. It's sufficient for an end of session report. And so next week, Mr. Shaw won't be here either. So the next conversation we'll have about the state legislative agenda and session activity will be on the 19th of May.
Thank you for the update. Are there questions for Mr. Taylor? I think finding out from the executive where we are with the government affairs team would be interesting, and it'd be kind of in this weird limbo. If they have been hired, we'd be able to have them come and introduce themselves so that we as the council are aware of them, since they work for us as well. It'd be good. I don't know if they've been hired, but
I've been participating in some of the process, and so I know that good progress has been made towards hiring both the director and the specialist. I'm not certain if the executive branch or office is ready to make announcements yet, but I do know that they've been actively working on hiring, and so it's quite possible by the 19th they'll have final decisions made. So I can certainly check with them to see if they could do a briefing for the council at that point in time.
Okay. It'd be something to think about in the month of May or early June as that finalizes. Okay, we will move to our review of our May 6th council agenda. Ms. Long.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is your regular meeting agenda for tomorrow's meeting. It is amended. We'll start with your consent agenda. You have one item for introduction and scheduling, and that's 2025-511. This is granting a supplemental franchise to Public Utility District Number 1 of Thurston County for the location of water lines. This is for referral to rules, and you'll be setting the final on that one for May 27th. Under final action, you have one resolution, and that's R 2025-147. And this is confirming the appointment of a new member to the Transportation Advisory Commission. Under proclamations, section 7, you do have two items here. First up is designating May 5th through the 9th as Affordable Housing Week in Pierce County. And that was requested by council members Ayala and Denson. Did you want to select a reader for that one?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Unless Councilmember Ayala wants to fight me for it.
Okay, thank you. And the other proclamation is proclaiming May 5th as Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and People Awareness Day in Pierce County. And that was requested by council members Yambe and Hitchen.
And I would like to have Councilmember Yambe read that unless he does not want to, since you were the driving force to make it happen. Okay.
Okay,
So
perfect.
Councilmember
Thank
Yambe.
you.
Thank you.
Moving to section 8, resolutions, there are 2 items here. The first is R 2025-143. This is confirming R.L. Soley as the Director of the Department of Emergency Management. And that was heard in the Public Safety Committee on April 28th and received a due pass recommendation. The other resolution is R 2025-141S. This is identifying street lighting and other neighborhood traffic projects for funding and requesting the county engineer to review and authorize said projects. This received a due pass as substituted at EIDC on April 22nd, and there is 1 amendment to this proposal. And those are your agenda items for tomorrow afternoon's regular meeting.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the council agenda for tomorrow? Seeing none, Mr. Swanson to brief the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hitchin. We do have 1 amendment tomorrow for Resolution R 2025-141S. This is your council-directed neighborhood traffic safety program. The 1 amendment, simple amendment for tomorrow would add 1 additional project to the exhibit under the District 3 portion of the list. This new project would be the install a reflective arrow sign on Waller Road East, south of the intersection with Military Road East, on the curve near 16613 Waller Road East. This is a very narrow tailored project. This is an area where on a strip of road in a segment where a school has recently been constructed. So the studies and everything have been done. This is a very specific issue of cars going off the roadway at this specific kind of tricky curve location that they're trying to address.
Thank you for briefing us. Any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Swanson. We'll take that up tomorrow. There are no grants. So any other questions or comments on tomorrow's agenda? Okay, we'll move on to committee agendas. Ms. Long.
Okay, so this afternoon at 1:30, there is a CDEC committee meeting. There is 1 proposal on this agenda and there is 1 presentation. The proposal is R 2025-148, and this is confirming Travis Buell as the Director of the Parks and Recreation Department. That has a May 13th final hearing date. And next on your agenda is the Permit Workflow Improvement Implementation Report. That will be with David Kinley from Planning and Public Works. Tomorrow, Tuesday, May 6th, beginning at 9:30, you have a Health and Human Services Committee meeting. There's 1 proposal and there are 2 presentations on this agenda. The proposal is R 2025-149. This is authorizing the Human Services Department to reallocate 2024-2025 homeless housing program awards approved under Resolution R 2024-172S. This one has a May 13th final hearing date. Next, you have the Affordable Housing Pipeline in Pierce County presentation. That will be with Brian Schmidt from Human Services. And then you have the Pierce County Housing Authority updates, and that will be, you have a number of presenters there listed on your agenda. At noon tomorrow is your regular Tuesday study session. I'm just seeing the usual agenda items there. And then at 3 p.m. is your regular council meeting. And that is the meeting schedule for the remainder of this week.
Thank you for the update. Is there any other questions? Okay. I thought at some point we had the EFN coming into a study session. Am I misremembering that? Does anyone remember talking about that?
I don't, but I will follow up and find out.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I was just at the event this weekend and they were like, we'll see you next week. And then I'm like, I don't remember us approving it for next week, but I remember the conversation. So, okay. Okay. So we have a discussion of administrative items. So Mr. Taylor.
So with council members' permission, I think I'll forego that conversation today because you have a lot on your agenda. You have an important presentation from finance, for instance. That's next. That's going to take a little bit of time.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Ms. DeMuth, glad you are feeling well enough to be here, and we will dive into this report. And we all had a preview of the report. We just didn't have your expertise in the room, so it's not quite the same. So thank you. And yep, your mic is on.
Great. Well, thank you for your flexibility in rescheduling this. I really appreciate it. I ran out the door and forgot my folder with my notes. So I have somebody bringing it here. I'm going to use my computer in the meantime. All right, next slide, please. So on the agenda today, we'll be reviewing the results of our 2024 financial close for our fiscal year. The presentation is broken up into fund type. So we'll start with general fund, and I'll spend a little bit more on general fund than the other sections. But we'll review special revenue funds, our capital funds, enterprise funds, and then we'll end with our internal service funds. Next slide, please. So each of the sections will have a similar format to this. We'll start with an introduction. Just like to note that after the end of the first fiscal year of our biennium, it's not necessarily that we're always targeting 50% of that budget. Oftentimes, we will be a little bit below because costs in the second year are higher. Whether it's staffing costs or other service-related costs. So we use 50% as kind of that general marker, but it's not exactly the target that we're always aiming for. So beginning with the county's general fund, this is our largest fund and it's our primary operating fund. The 2024-25 biennial general fund budget totals $912 million with budgeted revenues of $876 million. The adopted budget assumes the use of $36 million in general fund reserves to help us close that gap between revenues and expenditures. While fund balance use was planned for 2024, we did not end up needing to draw from our reserves, and this is due to continued underspending within the general fund, as well as stronger than expected interest earnings. One moment. Right, so looking at our revenues closed 2024 at 51% of budget, which was a strong performance for us. While not a strict midpoint, this does reflect stronger than anticipated interest earnings, as well as stronger than budgeted performance. This is largely due to our higher interest earnings. Interest rates remained higher for longer levels, and the county maintained higher cash balances that we were able to invest. Expenditures ended the year at 47% of our biennial budget, or just under $427 million. Vacant positions were the primary driver of our underspending, which resulted in more than $14 million in salary and benefit savings. Next slide, please. So as we've seen in recent years, continued underspending contributed to another increase in our general fund ending fund balance for 2024. We added just over $23 million to our fund balance in 2024. This brings us to a total of $210 million. This represents a fund balance percentage of 47.6% and places the county in a strong financial position as we head into significant economic uncertainty. I will add that we are in the midst of building our 26-27 biennial budget. Those base budgets will be released later this week. We're seeing significant pressures on the general fund in the next biennium, as well as economic uncertainty that's putting pressure on our revenue growth. So we will be needing to make some difficult decisions in the next biennium, despite our healthy fund balance. Next slide, please. Taxes remain our largest source of revenue. That's our property tax and sales taxes, generating $294 million in 2024. This is 65% of our total general fund revenues. Charges for services is our next largest category, which brought in $64 million, or 14% of our total revenues. This category includes our indirect cost recovery. Those are charges that we charge to other funds for services provided by the general fund, as well as election services, motor vehicle license fees, legal service fees, and public safety revenues such as our jail housing and our intergovernmental law enforcement contracts. Recording fees are in this category. They were 33% of the biennial budget, so at lower levels. They came in $627,000 below budget in 2024. Public safety revenues were higher. They were at 67% of the biennial budget, with higher revenues on both our jail housing side as well as our law enforcement services. The miscellaneous revenue category primarily reflects our interest earnings. If you recall, we increased our interest earnings budget to $35.8 million during the mid-biennium adjustment. And despite that increase, we still came in above budget, closing 2024 at $40 million for interest earnings. We do expect interest earnings to come in above budget as well in 2025. For the intergovernmental revenue category, these revenues were above budget through 2024. This is largely due to a criminal justice state entitlement that we received, which came in $1.5 million above budget. Next slide, please. So this slide provides year-over-year changes comparing our 2024 actuals to our 2023 actuals. Overall, total general fund revenues increased by 5% from 2023 to 2024, driven primarily by growth in sales tax, charges for services revenues, and our miscellaneous revenues. These gains helped offset declines in our other categories, including transfers in, licenses and permits, and intergovernmental revenues. Some of our key revenue highlights. Our property tax revenues grew by a typical 2.8% over 2023. That's standard performance that we see year over year. Sales tax came in right at our budgeted amount. We exceeded the $131.8 million budget by only $17,000. So pretty proud of that accurate forecast, which I don't take credit for. Our charges for services revenues rose 12.7%. This was led by increased public safety revenues, which rose from $16 million in 2023 to just over $19 million in 2024. Our miscellaneous revenues were up nearly 15%. Again, this is due to our interest earnings and higher interest rates in 2024. Our intergovernmental revenues remained stable year over year, reflecting consistent levels of state and federal grants, which is the majority of this category. Our transfers in declined both year over year as well as against budget. And this is due to lower spending in our therapeutic courts, as well as the timing of our co-responder program reimbursements. So we have transfers coming from our behavioral health and therapeutic courts sales tax into the general fund to help support those programs. But we're seeing lower spending levels, so fewer transfers. Licenses and permits, which is largely made up of our cable franchise fees, came in $500,000 below budget. And this decline is expected to unfortunately continue as we see a shrinking base of cable subscribers. And then finally, our fines and forfeitures are seeing some modest growth as caseloads recover a bit post-pandemic, still at lower levels than historic prior to the pandemic, but we are seeing some slight growth. Next slide, please. Focusing in on our general fund taxes, this slide shows our long-term trend in property and sales tax revenues, which are the two largest sources of revenue within the general fund. Sales tax has increased significantly over the past decade. This is driven by strong economic growth, increased consumer spending, as well as growth in our population here in the county. However, sales tax is inherently volatile, which makes it sensitive to changes in our economic conditions, which we are seeing a lot of right now, as well as inflation and shifts in consumer behavior. In 2024, actual collections totaled $131.9 million, which aligned with our budget expectations. Just as a reminder, the adopted budget assumed growth of 4.9% in 2024 and 5.1% in 2025. The current forecast for our 2025 sales tax has been revised downward to around 3.1% right now. This is roughly $2.6 million below what we have budgeted for 2025. So we are monitoring that month to month, and we will keep a close eye whether any actions needed to be taken. Our property tax revenues have increased steadily over time, but at a very moderate pace due to our 1% statutory limit on property tax. We project continued growth at an average annual rate of 2.6%, which also accounts for the value of new construction and improvements. However, we will start to see some pressure on our property tax revenues as new construction begins to decline in future years. So while our county's growing reliance on sales tax, we use that to fund our essential services. This will require close monitoring and long-term financial planning to ensure that we navigate any revenue volatility, as well as address service demands that are rising faster than our available revenues within the general fund.
I'm going to pause you there. We have a question from Councilmember Denson.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify with sales tax. This is just our regular sales tax. This doesn't take into consideration any of our special designated sales tax like behavioral health or affordable housing, right?
Correct. This is our unrestricted sales tax that goes into the general fund. Any restricted sales tax revenue sources go into a special revenue fund.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question. We can continue. Thank you, Ms. DeMuth.
Right, next slide, please. Moving to our expenditures, this slide shows how 2024 expenditures compare to the biennial budget across significant general fund categories. We'll begin with our personnel costs or salaries and benefits. This category continues to represent the county's largest general fund expense, totaling $280 million or 66% of our total general fund costs in 2024. 46% of the biennial budget was spent on personnel costs. This is largely due to continued vacancies as well as other position-related savings. In our other services and charges category, this is our next largest category. It was at 48% of budget with $113 million spent in 2024. This category includes our contracted services, our allocated and our pre-allocated costs, as well as other operational expenses needed for our service delivery. Intergovernmental services was slightly above budget with 2024 actuals at $14 million or 51% of the biennial budget. This category includes expenditures such as our contribution to the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department, the Humane Society, as well as Southdown 911. The supplies category accounts for $13 million of our general fund biennial budget. The higher spending in this category reflects planned purchasing activity that occurred in the first year of the biennium. So overall, most of our categories are trending below budget at the midpoint of the biennium with significant savings in our personnel costs. Next slide, please. The total general fund expenditures increased by 3.4% or $14 million in 2024 compared to the prior year. This year-over-year variance is partially offset by higher one-time transfers that we had in 2023. So actual cost increases are higher than what it appears. Overall spending remains below budget with only 46.8% of the total budget spent at the midpoint of the biennium. Some of our key drivers of the underspending include salaries and benefits. Salaries and benefits grew by $16.5 million or 6.2% over the prior year, totaling $280 million. And other services and charges increased slightly, about 1.9% over 2023, with actuals totaling a little over $113 million. Transfers out were also below budget at about 42%. Across all categories, below the 50% mark. Next slide, please. So this slide categorizes our expenditures by function. Public safety and the criminal justice system continue to represent our largest share of general fund expenditures, totaling $323 million or 76% of all of our spending last year. Of that amount, corrections accounts for about 32%. We're still seeing some lower spending levels in corrections, largely driven by the number of vacant corrections deputies that they continue to have. The legal and judicial category also reflects some underspending. This is largely due to vacancies in the courts, as well as the prosecuting attorney and assigned counsel. The largest driver of underspending in the general government category is our miscellaneous current expense allocations. Only 34% of the MCE budget was spent in 2024. Some of that is the timing of payments to providers, as well as some allocations shifting into 2025. And the natural and economic environment category is at 41% of our biennial budget. This category includes our planning and public works, planning and code enforcement division, which was at 41% of their budget through 2024. And this is also mostly due to vacancies. So year over year, public safety continues to be our largest area of general fund spending. So despite vacancies that we've had on both law enforcement as well as corrections, our costs in 2024 increased by $14 million. This is a 7% increase over 2023. Legal and judicial functions increased by about 2%, or a little over $2 million. And general government expenditures grew by 6.5%, or just over $4 million. So this slide provides our general fund expenditures by individual appropriation within the general fund. Sheriff, law enforcement, as well as corrections account for the largest portion of our budget, representing a combined 44% of our total budget. As of the end of the year, the sheriff's office had expended $178 million of its $380 million biennial budget. Most departments you'll see are trending below the 50% mid-biennium mark. Assigned counsel, miscellaneous current expense, and planning and code enforcement had the lowest relative spending, each spending about 41 to 42% of their budget appropriations.
Can we go back to that? I have a question about that slide, and we've got a lot of information, see if anyone else does, but the emergency management, it talks about FEMA, and just wondering, is the amount, the missing amount changed due to federal changes with FEMA, or is it that normal FEMA takes so long to reimburse? Because I've heard that.
Yes, it's a lot of timing issues with FEMA. I think we still, I could be wrong, but we still have some outstanding FEMA funds related to the Maui wildfire, that effort. So there's a lot of kind of deferred and accrued spending and revenues that occur in emergency management.
Okay, but they've paid, okay. We'll make it work. Okay, thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Not seeing any. Thank you, Ms. Smith.
So the last couple of slides we have for the general fund cover what we call our risk model. So the county uses an interactive risk model to evaluate how budget decisions affect our revenues, expenditures, and unassigned fund balance over time. This model provides a 6-year financial outlook, which helps support our long-range planning efforts and helps county leaders understand the long-term impact of resource allocation choices. The model assumptions are informed by key economic indicators as well as external factors that influence both our revenues and our expenditures. The version presented on this slide has been updated with actuals from 2024. So 2025 still reflects budget, our adopted budget, and our 26-27 base budgets have not yet been loaded into this model. So as you'll recall, the adopted 24-25 budget included targeted reductions, such as the closure of 46 vacant positions in the proposed budget, which helped partially offset the addition of 22 new positions that were added through the budget process. We also added 14.2 new FTEs during the mid-biennium adjustment. So our recent growth in general fund reserves has been driven primarily by underspending. So we keep adding to our fund balance because our revenues are performing well or as expected, but we're underspending primarily due to vacancies. And so that results in funds being added to our fund balance. If we look ahead, if the county fills our current budgeted positions, which is what we hope to do, the associated costs do place increased pressure on our reserves. As you can see, wait, can you go back one slide? Yeah. Thank you. So you see over time, our general fund reserves declining below our fund balance policy of 15%. And in the out years, dropping below the 10% needed for cash flow. So that's cash flow needed just to pay our bills month to month.
Ms. Smith, can I ask a question on this one? Last budget, we actually budgeted vacancy savings for the sheriff's department.
We did. Yes, we did.
And so my question is, does this model reflect that moving forward as a policy choice, or does it not?
It does not moving forward beyond the biennium.
Okay, thank you. That was a new accounting thing for me, so thank you.
So what we see here reinforces the importance of considering strategic actions. So this could include cost containment, revenue enhancements, or structural adjustments that we'll need to consider to maintain long-term fiscal sustainability.
I have a quick question.
Moving to
about
the
that.
next slide now.
We're gonna pause and have Councilmember Denson ask a question.
This is a scary slide. I
It is.
understand cost containment and revenue, whatever the word was, enhancements.
Enhancements.
Could you give us an example of structural budget adjustments? What does that mean?
So similar to what we did in the current biennial budget, where we had for most departments a 4% budget reduction. So we went into
Okay.
building the 24-25, assuming a reduced level of spending. So it's budget adjustments, reprioritizing of funding from lower priority services to what we would consider higher priority services. So making adjustments such as that.
And that's different from cost containment? To me, that kind of seems similar.
It's similar.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
Go ahead, sorry. I was trying to signal a conversation happening in the back room.
So we will be bringing forward in the near future what the risk model looks like with our 26-27 base budget loaded into it. As I mentioned, there are increased pressures. Costs are going up significantly from what we're experiencing in the current biennium, as well as lower anticipated revenue growths. So unfortunately, it does get a little bit more dire than this. Next slide, please. So this slide demonstrates what would happen if we did a budget reduction or we continued to have under expenditures. That's what we're experiencing. Continue to bring forward this risk model that shows our fund balance going down significantly over the next several years, but that doesn't come to fruition. And that's because we continue to underexpend within the general fund. So I just wanted to demonstrate what it would look like if we had under expenditures of $10 million annually, which we have easily been experiencing that over the last several years. It does help keep our general fund reserves up above that, right around that 15% threshold 6 years out. So adjustments to the budget like that can significantly influence our future sustainability. Right. Any questions on general fund before we move to our special revenue funds?
Not seeing any lights, so we will go ahead and move on.
All right. So our special revenue funds capture our revenues that are legally restricted or committed for specific purposes. This includes transportation funding, human services, parks and recreation services as well. So all of those dedicated revenue sources that come into our county for specific purposes. In 2024, these revenues totaled $486 million, which is 54% of the biennial budget. And expenditures reached $451 million, which is 40% of the planned $1.1 billion biennial budget. Variability in state and federal grant allocations, as well as the timing of reimbursements and capital project schedules, can significantly impact our expenditure actuals. So you will see variability over time in these funds. Special revenue funds are primarily supported by tax revenues as well as grant funding. By the end of 2024, most of our major revenue sources were at or above the 50% target of the mid-biennium. Tax revenues, which is primarily property and sales tax, as well as our real estate excise tax, totaled $182 million, or 51% of the biennial budget. The higher tax revenues are driven by REIT revenue coming in higher than budgeted. So it came in at 66% of the $38 million budget. Intergovernmental revenues, which consist largely of state and federal grants, these came in at $179 million, or 54% of the biennial budget. This does include an accounting adjustment that we have to do for our ARPA funding. So it carries forward a $27 million revenue deferral based on what we actually expend in the prior year. So that is included in our intergovernmental revenue actuals. Charges for services reflects higher planning fee revenue that we received, which came in at 77% of the budget. Both park impact fees and traffic impact fees are in this category, and those came in higher than budgeted. Miscellaneous revenues include higher interest earnings, as well as an unbudgeted opioid settlement payment from Johnson & Johnson. Our licenses and permits are below budget, and this is primarily due to lower levels of building permit revenue. And then finally, transfers in are slightly above budget. This is based on the timing of transfers into surface water management, county road, and behavioral health partnership funds.
Ms. Munoz, I've been in this council the entire time COVID dollars have been in here. What's the normal county intergovernmental level of funding?
I'll have to follow up with you.
Okay.
We've
I've just
had-
never seen it without
Yeah.
CARES dollars or ARPA dollars, so I legitimately don't, I mean, I could look it
Mhm.
up, but I'm assuming.
I mean, for ARPA in and of itself, you could take off a little over $100 million from the totals, but we do have other COVID-related funds that have been received outside of our ARPA allocations.
Okay, I think it'd be, as we think about how we're gonna share that information with the council, it'd be, some of us have been here during COVID, some, I think one was here prior, Councilmember Krueger maybe remember because she was staff, but just like level setting the reality of our government without
Sure.
COVID dollars, I think is gonna be important. Thank you.
Yeah, we can bring that information forward. 26, 27 certainly is not going to be normal for us either.
Yeah.
Given what we're seeing happen at the federal level with grant funds. Great, moving to the next slide, our total revenues for special revenue funds increased by 11.2% in 2024, reaching a total of $486 million. Intergovernmental revenues were 8.5% higher than 2023, or about $14 million. Sales tax shows a 19.5% growth. This is due to a full year of collections in the Maureen Howard sales tax that was implemented mid-year 2023. So that's why we see such a large growth in sales tax. Charges for services revenue was at 24%, or $15 million above 2023 levels. This is due to the increased planning fees, primarily in the form of impact fees. Property tax reflects our average annual increase right around 2.5%. Our REIT revenues were 12.5% higher than 2023. That's about $2.5 million more than the prior year. And then our growth in miscellaneous revenue reflects our higher interest earnings. So moving to our special revenue fund expenditures, this shows expenditures across the major spend categories. Underspending in our other services and charges category is primarily driven by professional services. So actuals reached only 41% here with a total budget of $361 million. This reflects the timing of contracted services, particularly within our human services and our planning and public works funds. Salaries and benefits came in below budget due to continued vacancy-related savings across those departments. Transfers out were lower than expected, and that's primarily due to the timing of capital projects. We only transfer those funds as expenditures occur. And then intergovernmental services were slightly under budget. One of the drivers here are the payments for the Key Peninsula and Peninsula Metropolitan Park districts, which will occur in 2025. So now we'll look at special revenue funds specifically for human services. Total human services related spending ended the year at $163 million. This represents almost 39% of their biennial budget. Spending levels are influenced by the timing of reimbursements to providers, particularly within our human services funds, our behavioral and therapeutic courts fund, and our taxpayer and accountability fund. A major portion of the under expenditures that you'll see in the Housing and Related Services Fund, this is our Maureen Howard funds. $17 million was awarded in March of this year in 2025 for affordable housing projects, and an additional $12 million is currently in procurement. So you see very low spending in 2024. The Community Development Fund reflects underspending due to capital project timelines, with funds expected to be drawn down later this year. And then our opioid settlement fund expenditures are expected to increase this year in 2025, following the adoption of the Behavioral Health Improvement Plan. So a key procurement was pending finalization of that plan, and that procurement is expected to close, I believe, this month. Moving to our Parks and Recreation funds, expenditures here totaled $23 million in 2024. This is 41% of the $56 million biennial budget. Underspending within these funds, it's primarily due to delays in our capital projects. It's those transfers of our special revenues into the construction funds occur as spending happens. We'll go into a little bit more detail on capital projects and those fund transfers in the next section. And then our last slide for special revenue funds is planning and public works. Expenditures here totaled $152 million in 2024. This is 38% of their biennial budget. There was lower spending in several of their major funds, including the County Road Fund, Surface Water Management, secondary roads, and traffic impact fees. This is primarily due to reduced transfers to capital funds, which reflects delays in project timelines. You'll hear me say this a lot, as it's a common theme. In the Building and Development Fund, we had lower than anticipated building permit revenues, which led to lower expenditure levels. And then the last item to note is our Historical Preservation and Program Fund. This fund saw increased grant awards to external agencies in 2024, but overall spending for this fund is expected to align with budgeted levels. Any questions before shifting to our capital funds?
Any questions? I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on. Thank you.
Okay. So our capital project funds account for our major capital projects, primarily for county-owned facilities, our parks, our roads, and surface water management capital projects. Capital project revenues and expenditures are significantly below our budgeted levels, with only 29% of revenues and 21% of expenditures realized through 2024. This reflects continued delays that we've seen in capital project activity and the associated fund transfers to support those projects. Transfers from other funds, primarily or special revenue funds, are the largest source of capital project revenue. Only 28% of the total $151 million biennial budget was realized in 2024. This total is about $43 million through the end of the year. Grant revenues totaled $20 million, or 38% of the intergovernmental category budget. Several parks capital projects assumed grant funding that has not yet been realized or identified. This includes funding from the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, or LTAC, Recreation and Conservation Office, or RCO funding, Department of Commerce funding, congressional appropriations, as well as private donations. So Pipeline Trail, Orange Gate Park, Sprinker Recreation Center, and the Frontier Horse Arena projects all have grant assumptions that have not been fully realized yet. Total capital project revenues were about 45% lower compared to 2023, with only 29% of the biennial budgets received to date or through 2024. As I mentioned, this is due to those delayed transfers from other funds as well as slower grant activity. Transfers in were 55% lower compared to 2023, with just 28% of the $151 million budget realized. Capital project expenditures also remain well below budget. Only 18% of the $265 million capital outlays budget was spent through 2024. Ongoing tariff uncertainties are anticipated to further disrupt our supply chains as well as increase our capital project costs in 2025. So we're doing a lot of research in this space to better understand how we'll handle these cost increases when they occur. I know we've already seen our timber costs increase by about 30% due to tariffs. So likely to see a lot of cost increases related to our capital projects. Other services and charges totaled around $12 million. This is 26% of the biennial budget. This is primarily due to lower spending on contracted services like engineering and planning. Looking at our capital project funds by department, we'll start with facilities management. Capital spending here totaled just over $8 million in 2024. This represents only 7% of their biennial budget. Some key projects, including the Justice Center campus upgrades, as well as our 1501 Market tenant improvements, were focused on planning in 2024. So we do expect spending to increase in 2025 as those efforts advance. The REIT Capital Fund has been impacted by the delay of a couple of other large projects. An example is the Sheriff Property Room. This is budgeted for a little over $10 million. And as you know, Facilities is working on a new solution for this project. The Election Center has a $13 million budget. That project is dependent on completing the Sheriff's Property Room. Shifting to our Parks and Recreation capital funds. Spending here reached just over $19 million in 2024. This is 31% of the biennial budget. Most of the underspending, again, tied to construction delays, as well as the timing of land acquisitions. For the Conservation Futures Capital Funds, there were 3 major property acquisitions completed in 2024. This includes the Pros property at Swan Creek, North Salmon Creek Heritage, and Haley State Park. These 3 land acquisitions totaled about $3 million. An additional $7.5 million in property acquisitions is planned for this year, with closings anticipated between the second and fourth quarters. So we should see expenditures increase. Within the Parks Construction Fund, Orange Gate Park and Frontier Arena improvements are in the design and permitting phases, with construction expected to begin this year and extend into 2026. By the end of 2024, spending on these projects was less than $500,000 of the nearly, looks like a little over $11 million that's budgeted for those projects. Longer-term investments such as the Sprinker building improvements and turf fields are in early planning stages, with most of the design and construction scheduled for this year through 2028. And the Chambers Golf Turn Stand, this is probably our most advanced project in terms of cost. Construction is underway. Grand opening is scheduled for September of this year. $2 million of the $3.3 million budgeted for this project has been spent. And then for our Paths and Trails Construction Fund, construction of the Chambers Creek Canyon Trail is underway. $3.2 million of the $4.6 million budget was spent through 2024. The Parkland Community Trail is moving toward bid and construction, with work anticipated to begin in late July of this year. And then finally, our Spiketon Bridge has a public opening planned for June 2025. And then our last category is our Planning and Public Works Capital Funds. Expenditures here totaled $44 million in 2024. This represents 27% of their biennial budget. In the Public Works Construction Fund, spending was delayed due to environmental permitting issues, which prolonged right-of-way acquisition timelines and construction schedule shifts. Many of these are dependent on our property owners' willingness to sell, as well as coordination with external entities. Additionally, expenditures are seasonal as we're moving into construction season now, so we should see the majority of spending occurring late spring into our fall seasons. Given the current delays, however, the department does anticipate needing to carry forward budget into the 26-27 budget for many of these projects. Surface Water Management Construction Fund encountered delays primarily tied to challenges in acquiring key properties that they needed. Without the necessary land acquisitions, that slows down our design work and results in construction delays as well. Progress is contingent on completing both the acquisition and design phases, so we're not sure how much expenditure we'll see increase in 2025. And then finally, for our Transportation Facilities Fund, this just has one project budgeted in this fund, and the department is reassessing options to identify more cost-effective solutions. So that project is also delayed. Great, moving to our second to last category. These are our enterprise funds. These funds support the county's business type operations. So this includes sewer utilities, our airports, our golf courses, the ferry system. These activities are primarily funded through fees that users of those systems pay. Enterprise funds generated $186 million in revenue in 2024. This is 47% of their $399 million biennial budget. And expenditures totaled $139 million, or 30% of the budget. For enterprise funds, charges for services are the primary revenue source, generating $115 million in 2024. This was 62% of their total revenues. Higher than budgeted revenues were driven by primarily Chambers Bay Golf Course. As of year end, the golf course had received 61% of their budgeted biennial revenues. So higher rounds of golf and other activities occurring at Chambers. Transfers in totaled $37 million, or 20% of total revenues. This category is below budget due to fewer transfers into our sewer capital funds. Contributions and recoveries reflect unbudgeted developer contributions for non-county sewer capital projects. These revenues are offset by corresponding expenditures. And then finally, intergovernmental revenue fell short of our budget due to delays in anticipated grants primarily for the airport fund. As of year end, only 13% of the $7.9 million in grant revenue had been received. This is primarily due to the postponement of the Thun Field runway reconstruction project. So enterprise fund revenues totaled $186 million in 2024. This is a 2% increase over the prior year. Growth was primarily driven by charges for services revenue, which was up nearly 8% or $8 million from 2023. This category is mostly our public utility rates. Sewer revenues make up 84% of those revenues. Moving to expenditures, the transfers out as well as our capital outlays categories. These are primarily driven by public planning and public works funds. Within sewer, we had delays related to permitting, easements, and contracting, which slowed our capital spending. Many of these issues have since been resolved, so spending is expected to increase in the second and third quarters of this year. However, due to those delays, we do expect overall under expenditure by the end of the biennium, with several capital projects requiring a carry forward into the next biennium. One project in the airport fund is also expected to extend into 2026. In the sewer utility fund, lower than expected expenditures are driven by underutilization of professional services, as well as vacancies and some Tacoma treatment charges that came in below budget. In the sewer construction fund, only 11% of the budget was expended in 2024. This is primarily due to delays in permitting, easements, and contract execution for some of our major planned projects. For the airport fund, capital outlays account for more than half of the biennial expenditure budget. Delays here are tied to the Thun Field runway project, which underwent a new evaluation, and design work is now scheduled for 2025, with construction deferred to 2026. And then finally, the ferry fund spent less than anticipated on repairs and maintenance in 2024. This contributed to overall underspending in that fund. All right, moving to our last category of internal service funds. So these funds support our centralized county services such as information technology, fleet, facilities management, as well as risk management. At the midpoint of the biennium, both revenues and expenditures are tracking just under 50%, which is considered normal. Revenues totaled $32.7 million, 49% of the budget, and expenditures were $141 million, which was 47% of the budget. Charges for services are the primary source of revenue for these funds, and it reflects the cost reimbursement model used for centralized services. Miscellaneous revenues are at 51% of the budget. These are driven primarily by equipment and vehicle rentals, which totaled $17 million or close to 90% of miscellaneous revenue. Revenues increased by 7.2% or nearly $9 million from 2023 to 2024. This growth is largely due to higher costs of service delivery and the cost of goods, which drive reimbursements needed from county departments. Charges for services grew by nearly 12% from $98 million to $109 million. Expenditures across most internal service funds categories remained below 50% of their biennial budget by the end of 2024. Capital outlays are primarily influenced by the timing of purchases in both our fleet and equipment services funds. So more vehicles and equipment were purchased in 2024. This was to help address supplier delays, but overall spending is expected to align with the biennial budget. And then looking at actuals compared to budget by individual fund, Equipment services, again, reflects higher levels of spending in 2024 to address supply chain delays. Self-insurance claims were $4 million above projections, and this reflects the accounting practice that we use of booking claims when they are known and reasonably estimated. Spending in the radio communications fund is expected to increase this year with the planned purchase of upgraded radio equipment. Workers' compensation claims totaled $4.8 million in 2024. This is close to $3.5 million less than what we experienced in 2023 and is almost $7.5 million below budget. So positive there. However, additional claims for 2024 can still be reported. And then finally, fleet services reflects early vehicles arrival after the county prioritized upfront ordering to avoid manufacturer delays that we've been experiencing. That includes our 2024 fiscal year close report.
Thank you, Ms. Demuth. I'm going to look to my colleagues to see if there are any questions, and then I have two. We'll go to Councilmember Denson first.
Thank you. Just a quick question. You said that all the departments are thinking about what's happening with tariffs and potential cost increases. You just mentioned fleet services. Cars are definitely looking like they're going to get more expensive. Are we talking about, ordering and locking in prices now for anything that we're anticipating needing in the future?
We're in conversations. Most of our 24-25 planned purchases have been done so that we can receive those vehicles. But yes, we are assessing the economic environment and trying to figure out, we have to work within our appropriated budget authority for this biennium. So we could consider an increase in a final supplemental in order to purchase more vehicles now. But we're evaluating the needs.
Well, I think a supplemental budget, I know we would understand if one was brought forward, not only for that purpose, but other capital expenditure needs, supplies, equipment, materials, things like that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Councilmember Yambe, do you have any questions? Okay. I think Councilmember Ayala, I don't know if you're in a place where you can speak. I know she's been listening. But the two questions I have, one is related to this around the delays for projects, and some were permitting and some were other things. And I'm just wondering, I'm going to make an assumption, but I want to ask that projects that now are more expensive, how does that work? Like, what do we do if something that was budgeted was going to be $1.4 million and now it's going to be $1.8 million? Is that something that's done through a budget amendment, or?
It depends. We'll have to assess priority as costs escalate. We may not have all the resources needed to complete all the projects we had originally planned. So it will require some reprioritization potentially. Also working within our overall budget authority. Right now, as you saw, we have significant underspending in our capital project funds. So in terms of budget authority, I don't see us necessarily needing to come back for a budget adjustment, but likely re-looking at reprioritizing projects.
Okay. And then my second question is about the ferry, the $1 ferry fee that we captured and started for the first time. I know I'm going to get asked, can I just at some point just get how much did we bring in that first year?
Yes.
There's lots of interest on the island, so. Any other questions? Not seeing any, so thank you for the first step in the budget. Oh, Councilmember Ayala raised your hand at the last minute. So Councilmember Ayala.
Thank you. Do you think you may
Councilmember Ayala, it's
you
really
project
hard to
happening?
understand you. We're not sure that we heard your question, especially since I started talking over you, but you were very choppy. I don't know how to describe it, but the audio is very choppy. Do you want to try one more time? And now if you're talking, we're not hearing you at all. And we lost her. Okay. Well,
Happy to respond
Yeah, it's
to
like,
any questions.
we all know how to get a hold of you.
afterwards. Yes.
So, okay. Any other questions? Not seeing any. So thank you, Ms. Jimmy. Oh, we'll go to Councilmember Riombe.
No, this isn't a question, it's more of a comment that I, for some reason, am not able to formulate cogent thoughts at the moment, and I will follow up with you offline. But appreciate that presentation. Yeah, so it was very accessible and just have some issues articulating them right now. Sorry about that.
Please send us your questions. We're happy to follow up.
Budget process is a deluge, so get
Yeah.
ready for the fire hose.
You're new, so
Words,
So-
words.
understandable.
Yeah, so, do you, okay.
Just a
You-
comment.
You turned your light off, so then I was confused.
Yes, that's all right.
Mr. Taylor.
So just a comment, just a reminder, your next committee of the whole meeting, which is scheduled for the end of the month, we'll revisit the risk model and talk about assumptions that are currently built in to the department instructions for the next biennium's budget. Hopefully we'll know what happened at the state, right? All the bills will have been signed or vetoed, and you'll have a picture of what's going on there. We were also intending to talk about ARPA status at that point in time. We can certainly modify that conversation to include your question about intergovernmental revenue without CARES and without ARPA money. But it's a reminder that you're going to revisit this topic in a few weeks. And so you'll have another opportunity to discuss it.
Okay. Well, thank you for all of the time and the care of helping us walk through this. This is a significant process of developing a biennial budget and coming to consensus on what is actually put forward and scheduled. So thank you for helping us on this journey. I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so we're going to turn this over to Ms. Long. We do have an executive session before us today. Ms.
Right.
Long.
Thank you. So this is an executive session authorized by RCW 4230-110-1I. The purpose today is to discuss with legal counsel matters of pending or potential litigation to which the county is or may become a party, and which public knowledge of the discussion is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the county. And as usual, before we go into executive session, Madam Chair, if you'd state the time at which we will return to public meeting, and I will note the only item listed on our agenda following executive session is adjournment, and no action will be taken by the council following the executive session. And I'm going to go to Michelle to ask for time estimate.
20 minutes. Okay.
And we'll need a few minutes to connect
Uh,
Councilmember Ayala and set up the room, but it will be all in person in here.
Okay, so we are going to move to executive session with coming back to regular session and only adjournment on the agenda after that at, if I'm doing my math, 12, if I say 12:35, does
yeah.
that give everybody?
Mhm.
At 12:35. So we are in executive session until 12:35. Thank you.
Use the restroom real quick.
We're ready when you're ready.
Good afternoon. We are back from executive session. The time is 12:36. Seeing no further business before this council in study session, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.